video and all other videos on this channel are for entertainment purposes only. The content of this video and all other videos on this channel are the opinions of the creator only and do not constitute legal, trading, investment, or financial advice of any kind. Investing carries a high level of risk and the majority of retail clients lose money. Do not invest any capital unless you understand the risks and you are prepared to lose it all. Alright, hello and welcome to Camel Finance. I'm your boy Camel, and one of the members, I think it was Matt, asked me if I could compare the crypto mining stocks this cycle and last cycle with Bitcoin's performance. I think it's fair to say many people, including myself, are actually somewhat surprised or disappointed, is probably a better word, at the underperformance of the miners. And I have often pointed at this and said things like, people need to manage expectations. I know MicroStrategy has absolutely smoked Bitcoin's performance, but to think that all of these miners were going to do 20 to 30x off the lows was probably not founded in reality. But if they're not going to outperform Bitcoin, then is there any point holding them? I think there's a fair question there. And so Matt was kind of asking me to take a look at these and compare them, and again, compare this cycle to last cycle and see what I could find. And actually, to my surprise, the miners are doing better than even I was thinking. So I want to show you exactly what we're looking at here. So to kick things off, I appreciate this is messy, but I've got a bunch of the most popular crypto miners or crypto stocks, and I've overlaid them all on top of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is yellow, and you can see MicroStrategy, the clear winner of this cycle so far, right? Now, it's important to point out a couple of things. First of all, I have aligned all of these from Bitcoin's ultimate 4-year cycle low in November of 2022. So from the start of this 4-year cycle for Bitcoin, here is the performance. Needless to say, MicroStrategy, the clear winner, as of the time of recording, right around a 16x, and it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 or 21x off the most recent high. Down the right-hand side, let's get a magnifying glass to help you guys out. Okay, you can see Cypher has, so far, at least to date, outperformed Bitcoin, as has Wolf and Coin, and CLSK, BTBT, Hut, Riot, Bitfarms, Marathon, as you can see down here, all currently underperforming Bitcoin. However, the gains there are still a decade or more of S&P 500 returns. So I wouldn't say they're anything to be sneezed at, but it's also objectively true that we would have probably been better off holding spot Bitcoin over these miners down the bottom. Now, there's another way to look at this, and that is to say that if we zoom in down here just after the bear market low for Bitcoin in 2022, I appreciate it's quite messy, but right here is the ultimate bear market low for Bitcoin, which is the yellow line. And as you can see, many of these miners actually didn't bottom for around a month later, until late December of 2022. So another way to interpret this would be to say, okay, well, from the ultimate cycle low, let's measure the performance and do a comparison from there. And so all I've really done here is just shift this over slightly so that rather than starting at the left-hand side from the bear market low for Bitcoin, we have now picked the ultimate low from around late December, which is where, like I said, most of those mining stocks bottomed. And what you'll notice is MicroStrategy, since that ultimate cycle bottom for the miners, which occurred slightly later than Bitcoin's, is doing, 2,200%. And that is after a 50% decline from top to bottom, of course. So significantly more upside gains here. And then here's the important factor. When we come down here, you can see that it's actually only Riot and Bitfarms that are currently underperforming Bitcoin's performance from that ultimate cycle low, with all the rest of them having significantly outperformed Bitcoin since their cycle lows. So I think the first couple of things I wanted to point out here is, although we tend to look at the current miner charts, and a lot of people have either incorrectly managed their expectations or perhaps have got not the best entries. I mean, it's pretty reasonable to say no one's going to have sniped the absolute lows. But objectively speaking, even though it doesn't feel like these miners are outperforming Bitcoin, most of them actually are over this cycle, or at least most of them are not far off. So that's the first thing, because we've done very, very well, particularly in the member section, at catching a whole heap of these and trading in and out of them. But I do observe regularly that many people are kind of complaining and saying, well, why are the miners lagging? Why haven't they outperformed Bitcoin? And I guess ultimately the question is, why haven't they all done what MicroStrategy did? But I think it's, like I said earlier, kind of unreasonable to expect. And again, but it is important, for the most part, I think we need to be slightly more grateful with what the market is giving us to date. And so now what I want to do is move over to the prior cycle and see how it looked compared to the prior cycle, because this is where for me it got very, very interesting. I thought that when I was going to go back and check the prior cycle, this was going to be underperformance. I thought that this cycle was doing worse than the prior cycle, which is funny because I traded through the prior cycle as well, and I traded a bunch of these same stocks through that prior cycle. So now what I've done is align the 4-year cycle low from 2018 from Bitcoin's prior bear market and 4-year cycle low. And I'm going to first of all use the performance to this top peak here in Bitcoin in April of 2021. Now, what we can see straight away is up to that first top, it was actually only Riot and Marathon that were outperforming Bitcoin. All of these other stocks, all of them actually underperformed Bitcoin up to this point. As you can see, they're all underneath the yellow. So it was only Riot and Marathon that were the true overperformers. And again, even MicroStrategy wasn't overperforming Bitcoin when MicroStrategy put in its original cycle peak from the prior bull run. And once more, here's what's even more surprising. If we continue to use the 4-year cycle low, but also check the performance of the second top for Bitcoin, which of course occurred in September of 2021, you'll notice again that it's only Riot and Marathon that overperformed. Everything else underperformed Bitcoin, including MicroStrategy. Now again, these percentage numbers down here are absolutely not to be sneezed at, right? This is still very, very nice, handsome returns, particularly compared to a decade's worth of S&P 500 returns. But I was surprised to learn that during all of this, despite having traded through it, this cycle is clearly doing better than the prior cycle. So even though it might not feel like it, even though I think people need to manage their expectations a bit more, so far, it's hard to make the case that the hard right edge, the current cycle, is not significantly doing better than the prior cycle. I know there's one more bit of jiggery-pokery we can do here, and that is because during the C19 plunge, where Bitcoin sold off all the way down to about 3K, we actually saw a bunch of these miners put in new cycle lows. So now what I want to do is modify the date range and start it from the C19 peak, right? That's where these miners made these new divergent lower lows. And once more, it tells a very, very similar story. Many of these miners actually underperformed coming out of that low, and Marathon and Riot were still the clear winners. Now, BTBT, Bitfarms, and Hut actually did overperform during the later stages after we had that big C19 puke. But I think it's important to point out, in the context of what we're observing here, the massive overperformance that we see from some of these stocks and the bulk of the moves came right at the end of the cycle as we were just about to start to approach true tops, which tells me it seems reasonable to me, if we can assume the top is not yet in for Bitcoin, if we can assume that what we're going to get is a huge parabolic blow off top that is characteristic of Bitcoin coming to the end of its 4-year cycle, then I think it's reasonable to remain cautiously optimistic that as this yellow chart, which is Bitcoin, starts to move higher into a parabolic blow off top, and of course if this is a 10x to a 12x, that would be somewhere around the neighborhood of, let's say, 150k to 170k. Maybe what we see from here is even higher numbers for Bitcoin, 200, 250, whatever, in which case this yellow Bitcoin chart may well be somewhere in this kind of neighborhood. And if that's true, then it seems only reasonable to me that many of these miners and crypto stocks are likely going to continue to squeeze to the upside. And at that point, then I think what is currently being interpreted as lackluster performance will most probably have morphed into the kind of performance that people were hoping for all along. So I think in summary, I can conclude that I'm kind of surprised, right? I'm kind of surprised because admittedly, even though I've been telling people to manage expectations, I've been kind of thinking these numbers should have been higher by now as well. However, at least based on where we are in the cycle, the fact that most of them are overperforming Bitcoin tells me that things aren't going so bad. And of course, unless this cycle is about to just roll over and die, unless Bitcoin is going to not have a big blow off third and final angle to put in, then it seems only reasonable to expect these numbers to continue to climb from here. I do still believe that managing expectations is important. I don't really think it's reasonable to just assume that because MicroStrategy has done such huge numbers, the rest of them are going to. But I do remain cautiously optimistic here about trading these and continuing to hold the core allocation from the ones in which I hold a core allocation from the lows in until such time as I think the Bitcoin market has truly topped. So it would not at all surprise me if what we get from here is a kind of a bit more of a squeeze and some of these really start to blast off. I'm sure one or two of them, and we can never know which ones, will probably end up catching up with MicroStrategy. Not all the way up, but I wouldn't be surprised if one or two end up in this kind of super performance 15x type gains. So I think if you are a bit beaten down or concerned or frustrated with these stocks, then just know that as far as I can tell, and at least based on the comparative analysis to the prior cycle, there should still be some sunshine and rainbows left ahead of us, assuming, of course, that Bitcoin is not just about to roll over and die from here. So needless to say, the markets are closed today. And one thing I haven't mentioned, but I think it's probably worth mentioning, is I would speculate that this is probably doing better than most people's altcoin portfolios as well. Now, I'm sure there's going to be people that are mad with me for saying that. That's fine. It's business. It's not personal. Okay, it's my speculation that most people's alt bags probably don't look as good as this. And if they do, then pat yourself on the back because you're doing pretty well. But of course, the main difference with holding a company like this is the risk of things like rug pull or things crashing to zero is, of course, significantly less than with altcoins. But anyway, I'm not going to go there because I know I know people will be queuing to burn me at the stake if I say any more on that. I'll be back tomorrow with more normal content, and until then, take care from me. All the best. Cheers. Bye.
he's the man to see, rocking the markets with his contrarian spree. Trades like a pro, no fear, no shame, sticking to his guns in his money game. He's a badass, oh yes indeed. Camel Finance got the market's key, taking us normies on a bump.